the Constitution has been on a collision course with political speech for a long time. Really, it began with a brief history, if you will, with the Watergate era, when in post-Watergate reforms, so-called reforms, one of the great evils of politics was thought to be the very presence of money in politics. And the thought was, if we can get money out of politics, then we will have clean, honest politics, because then we will not have the corrupting influence of money in politics anymore. Others would have said that the problem with politics is government's too big, it influences too much of our lives and our businesses, and because it is so big, people will always be trying to influence anything or any decision makers that govern half of our money, that govern what we do in our businesses, that have such intensive regulation of our lives and our businesses, that you cannot get the money out of politics. And so the consensus emerged that they would regulate it. And regulate it with limits on money and who can contribute. And that opened up a dance, if you will, between Congress passing the laws, the Supreme Court hearing challenges to those laws under the Constitution, and then thirdly, the FEC at the federal level, the Missouri Ethics Commission at the state level, and every other state has some comparable agency that's regulating the participation in the political process. But I say it was at a collision course because at bottom, what was always the problem was political speech. You can try to regulate the money, but the money is merely a means by which somebody expresses a political viewpoint. And as I indicated earlier, the only reason somebody cares to express a political viewpoint is because they either care about their country or the direction it's headed or a policy that's being proposed, or oftentimes because they care about a particular piece of legislation that's going to affect their lives, their families, or their business. And so there's this irresistible force, like water going downhill, to have money in politics. The more larger government gets, the more invasive it becomes in our lives, the more interest there will be of everybody to influence government. So in many ways, it was a fool's errand to believe that simply passing laws would somehow change or prevent money from getting into politics, or change human nature and somehow prevent people who may be corrupt from acting in a corrupt fashion, though the ideal was certainly there. The problem is the First Amendment for those who want to regulate political speech, because the most protected form of speech, going back to the very earliest days of our nation, is political speech. Speech and the ability to petition your government for redress of grievances, protection of speech, particularly political speech, and a right to assemble as a group of individuals and petition our government are fundamental constitutional rights. So it's very limited what government can do in terms of regulating that. Nonetheless, since the 70s and since Watergate and this reform-minded good government mood, the Supreme Court has allowed in a series of cases some level of that regulation. But it has continued to be challenged, and there continues to be additional Supreme Court cases and regulation from the FEC. The most recent major federal legislation was the McCain-Feingold legislation that rewrote in large ways federal campaign finance law. Now again, in the past we've had a number of cases or decisions or challenges, Supreme Court or lower court, that were always at the margins, largely, of those laws. The game changer was recently in a case that's called Citizens United. And I'll talk in just a little bit of detail about that in a second. But let me recall the environment we faced right before that case. In the past presidential election, almost $1 billion was spent trying to influence the outcome of that presidential election. We figured the money the candidates spent themselves, third-party groups spent, political parties spent, and individuals or independent organizations spent. $1 billion trying to influence the election of the President of the United States. That doesn't even count the money that was spent to try to influence votes or voters in their decision for Senate races, state races, governor's races. So the amount of money is unprecedented in politics today. Despite all of these prior, quote, reforms that were supposed to get the money out, the amount of the money has increased dramatically. And so has, of course, my fellow lawyers in their ability, creativity, and talent to advise on both Republican, Democrat, and other sides. Anybody to come up with any rule you write, somebody's going to find a way around that rule, particularly when the interest of expressing a political point of view is so strong. So you can't keep it out. All you can try to do is regulate it or make it transparent or make it disclosed. But the penalties are significant.